session, as you all know, is regarding using Google Forms, specifically using Google Forms to create quizzes. So we're going to take a peek at what that looks like, and I certainly would encourage all of you to do the same thing on your own time. A lot of what I learn from all of the research and the lessons that I have is also working with it myself to see how it works best. So I'll give you just a quick overview of what it looks like and how you might want to implement it. But certainly, keep working on it from here on out. And I do have a slides presentation that I'll post along with this video. So if you want to go back and use that or refer to any of the resources, feel free to do that. I did include some resources that I thought were helpful. And I'll kind of just start there because I think it's important to discuss. So I am going to start by sharing my screen. And so here we go. Right. So hopefully in a second here, you will see kind of the last slide in my deck here. You all can see that, I presume. Yes? Okay. Well, now I can't because I keep flipping back. All right. So again, I will share this slide presentation with you later. But just so you know, there are some good resources here that have been created well before me. Google has some excellent resources to get you started, start to finish, on how to create a quiz in Forms. And it also looks like this. So feel free to utilize this after this training because, with us not being in person, it allows you another reference and a place to go if you have any of those questions at all. So feel free to check out that. Another question that may come up is cheating. And I found what I think is a pretty nice article regarding ways to kind of prevent cheating in the best way that you can think of. So feel free to check that out. And then if you're looking for any other resources, there's a few more here. And we'll dabble in quite a few of these thoughts that come out of some of these resources. But I wanted you to be aware that those are there as well. So please take a peek at those. So creating quizzes in Google Forms, let me actually start by asking, has anyone actually done that so far? Has anyone used Google Forms at all? Let's start with that. And if you don't want to unmute, you can just give me kind of a thumbs up. Okay, awesome. For those of you showing, if you want to unmute, feel free. So Google Forms has been around for a while. And originally people were using it on their own to create quizzes, but Google has been intuitive enough to now create it, more of the features that we want in a quiz directly in Google Forms. So like a lot of their other applications, it really sets you up from the start to create a quiz and walks you right through the process. So I'm just going to show you how we do that. But before I show you that, I want to talk about some items that you might be looking for or might be interesting to you. So I'm going to go back to my presentation here, if that's okay with you. So here we go. Google Forms, generally speaking, is another web-based application that's part of our Google Suite. And it's typically used to create forms, any form that you want to use to collect data. So oftentimes we've probably received one in an email, whether from the university or some other organization. And it's a nice tool to either design a survey, a quiz, a registration form. I've worked with other departments in our university that have created registration forms and other Google Forms that have really allowed that department to organize information, and then they have it on a Google Sheet if they wanted to rely on it later. So it's a nice opportunity. So getting started is very simple. So let's just take a peek right at that. And please feel free to unmute yourself if you have a question. If you want to wait till the end or pop it in the chat, I'm okay with that as well. So like anything else in Google, you always want to start with your hub and find forms. Okay. I used a form for part of our strategic planning that the university was doing, and I found it really helpful. And so using a quiz, creating a quiz from here is also a nice opportunity. I will say this, if you are used to using Blackboard for your grading, your Blackboard Grade Center, you can continue to do that, but understand that because this is a Google product, it's not going to connect directly to your grade center as if you had something else in Blackboard. That may not matter for some people. I know it's kind of a toss-up. Some use the grade center and some don't. So after you take a peek at how this works, you just want to be aware of that. So once I'm in my Google Forms here, you can see it off the bat here. I can create a blank form, or I have an option to create a blank quiz. So it's pretty nice. It also gives me some other templates as well. If any of you use a different type of assessment or an exit ticket, course evaluation, and these can be edited. So they're just types of templates. So if you do the plus create, as you see in other applications, or blank here, the important thing to note from here is that you want to turn this into a quiz, because right now it's just a blank form. Okay, versus if I was actually creating a blank quiz. So right now I'm creating a blank form. If I create a blank quiz, then of course it already is a quiz. Okay, hopefully that this is more confusing than it is. So once I'm in this blank form, if I want to turn this into a quiz, I go over here to my settings. Okay, again, a lot of these icons should look familiar to you if you've used the other Google products. Okay, so the first thing I would do is go over here to the third tab, quizzes, and you have this area that says make this a quiz. And what that does is it will give you the option to assign point values to questions, and it will allow for grading. So that's the difference of creating just a form. Okay, so once I've done that, I'm good to go. I will say, regardless of whether you are creating a blank form into a quiz, right, from blank, or a blank quiz, you always want to start with going to your settings, okay? Because you want to basically create your template and how you want this to work, okay? So when you go to settings, and you probably want to do this for each quiz that you create, unless you're duplicating quizzes, then you've already have it set up. But under your settings tab, you have three additional tabs, essentially. And the first one is general. This gives you the ability to collect email addresses. What I think is nice about that is when you select it, you can then provide receipts to those who are providing a response. So for instance, I'll give you my example. I used a form and I selected that. And so what happened was I got an email that said, thanks for filling out this quiz. Okay, so the respondent can actually see that they have a confirmation and this is what they've sent out to the instructor. So if you want to do that, if you want to create the ability to collect email addresses, and even if you're just doing a form, as a heads up, it's always nice to collect email addresses. Then you're aware of who's submitted either your quiz or your form. Okay, and then you can choose to select response receipts. So if a respondent requests the receipt or confirmation, then they will get it, or you can just make it so that everybody, no matter what, will get a receipt as soon as they submit their form. Okay, and then you've got your sign-in option here. So for this purpose of a quiz, you should be able to restrict it to Fitchburg State University. That way, you're only dealing with those who have a university account. If you need to do other than that, you can go ahead and unselect that. But in the meantime, also consider your responses. Do you want to limit it so that a student only has one response, or do you want to allow them to have several responses? So if it's a quiz, it's likely you want to limit it to just one, and then you would turn that on. Okay. Then here's some other permissions. Do you want the respondents, or do you want your students to edit this quiz after they submit? Probably not. And do you want to do you want your respondent or your student to see a summary chart and a text response. So again, these are just some additional permissions that you can set up, and you can change these for each quiz depending on the reason or the subject. Just peeking over here for a second, make sure I have you all. Thank you. Yes, so it appears in mine here. So I didn't actually answer any questions, but at the bottom one here. So Sarah asked a good question. Will the students actually see a copy of their answers if you, the instructor, select receipts? And the answer is yes, depending on how you set it up. Okay, so if that's what you want. And I apologize if I didn't see your question earlier. So that's the first tab there under settings. The next is presentation. Okay, do you want your students to see a progress bar, that they've completed 1 out of 10 questions? And then do you want to shuffle the question order? So this is one of those items in the article I mentioned about preventing possible ways to prevent cheating. And this is the idea that the question order will shuffle for every respondent or every student. So if that's something you're interested in, you can select that as well. Okay, and then if you want to provide any specific confirmation message, you can add that here. And then the last tab is quizzes. As you saw, you want to make sure that you make this a quiz. Okay, they give an option for Chromebooks, which we do not have at this time, so you can kind of pass that. And then you need to determine, what your options are for releasing your grade. Do you want the grade to immediately go out after it's submitted? Or do you want to turn it on for a manual review? So basically, similar to what you saw in my email a second ago, do you want the student to immediately see their grade with their submission? Or do you want to hold it, allow for you to manually review that, and go from there? So you can choose that as well. That may be dependent on what type of quiz you're dealing with. So if your quiz is, the majority is multiple choice and you've added the answers already, then you may be prepared to send out the submission immediately, the grade, immediately. If it's something like short answers or a manual graded process, then you might want to wait. Okay, by default, unless you uncheck, the student will be able to see the missed questions, the correct answers, and the point values. But again, you can unselect those if you prefer not. Okay, and save this. And so those are your settings, again, right under your settings tab here. Always go through each one of these to make sure that you've have it the way you want it set up. It walks you right through it, so that's really nice. So once I've done that, you can see I just have this very blank quiz at this point. It's untitled. I have really no questions in here. There are some other options that you might want to consider. This means add-ons. So just like you have other extensions and add-ons maybe to your Chrome browser, you can have add-ons to Google Forms. So, you can look into those if there's something that you feel like you might be missing. You can put an add-on here as well. I have done one that just gave me some additional email notifications for a form that I sent out. So you've got that. And then you've got themes. So you can customize your theme. So right now, here's the default. But they give you some options. So you can choose a different, header, or if this is a particular quiz for a course or a subject, maybe you've created a photo or you have a picture, you can also upload that just like you would any other picture, okay? Or if you had a photo. So that's kind of nice. You can add something there. So in this case, we'll add this header, and it allows me to insert it. And then once it inserts that, you can see the form theme colors automatically changed as well. Depending on how interested you are in that, I think it just kind of makes it flow a little nicer. And then you've got these colors to choose from here if you want to change your background or your theme color, and so forth. Okay. And then you also have a few fonts to choose from. So right now it's basic, but I can turn it into a formal. and so forth. So a couple of different options and themes and colors that you have up there as well. This next option is preview. So once you start putting in questions and answers and items, you might want to preview it. So right now you're not going to see a whole lot. This will give you an option to preview what your students will see. Okay, so we can exit out of there and go back. And then you've got your settings as we saw. You've got your send button. When you're ready, and I know we're a little ahead of the game here, when you're ready to, just very similar to your sharing options in the other products, you can send this form out. So we can talk right now about how you might do that. So once you have your quiz ready to go and you want to send this out, you can certainly send it via email, right? If you want to put in each of your students' emails. But I would think more practically that it would be by a link. So kind of like a shareable link that you would have in a Google Doc. You can get a link here. You can also have it shortened, and then you can just copy that. You can also embed this HTML if you have a web page or website that you want to use. But you could easily take this link and add it into your Blackboard site under an announcement or in an assignment and provide the link there. And then students can go right to the quiz from there. Or you can put it in any other location that you might be using. Okay, so you can also put it on social media, but in regards to quizzes, I can't imagine you would want to do that. But those are there for forms as well. Okay, so once you're prepared on how you want to, basically send this quiz out, you can copy this link, and then you're good to go. And so it's copied to my clipboard here. Okay, and then you've got your 3 dots, which is your kind of more options. And this allows you to make another copy of this quiz. You can put it in the trash. You can also get a pre-filled link. And that's the idea that your form would already have some options filled out. You can print this, and you can add collaborators. So in this case, if you're team teaching or you have a colleague that you want to share this quiz with and get some information, you can add them as a collaborator, similar to sharing in the other products. Okay. So you can see here, it's me. I've got this link, that I have already created for my students, but if I wanted to add any of my colleagues, I could do that here. So thankfully, it all looks the same as in the Google Docs and Sheets. So that's really nice. It's nothing you need to learn again. So going back to the 3 dots, and then there's the add-ons, and then preferences is kind of like your tools going forward. So these are default settings that you want to select for all forms. So if you don't want to have to remember to collect email addresses every single quiz or form you create, then you can just make it your default setting to always collect them. Okay, and then you can decide, again, as a default, if you'd like, whether you want to make certain questions required, and if you want to make a default quiz point value. If these are things that are constant for you and you don't want to have to change them each time, you can choose to create your default settings. And again, that's going to be for all forms, okay, because this is your forms setting. Okay, quizzes as well. So those are your icons at the top and kind of how they work. Here I can move this to a certain folder in my drive, but otherwise, as you can see, all of these changes will happen actually in my drive. Okay, so let's just make, I got all kinds of good questions. All right. So I'll come back to those if that's okay, because I can't read and talk at the same time. I know you think I'd figure that out by now. So the other items that I want to show you is I created a form previously, and or a quiz, I should say, previously, just to kind of show you the look and feel. So again, I just used one of their predetermined themes, and then it changed my colors here. But essentially, what I did is I call this a Google Forms quiz, and I wrote a little description, and I can edit that and I can change it anytime that I'd like. Okay, and you can see here it's going to let anybody know that I'm automatically collecting email addresses of those who fill out this form. And then I created a multiple choice question right here. Okay, and how you would create any question from start or in the middle or any time is this plus circle here, and it's going to say add question. So it's going to add it on top of the one I've already created. And I need to first decide what type of question. So you have quite a few options: multiple choice, checkbox, drop down. You can also upload a file for a question. You can read different articles. People have different opinions on what's the easiest. So certainly determine what works best for you. And you've also got some different grids to choose from as well. So in this case, we've got multiple choice. A couple of nice things that have been mentioned about Google quizzes for some people is the automation. Because Google is so integrated in automation, depending on your question, they will give you suggested answers. So it takes a little bit of work off of your hands. So if I put in a question like, what is the capital of, and I suppose I should spell it correctly, Massachusetts. Okay, it's below here, it says suggested correct answer, Boston. And I can actually select that and it will populate for me. And then rather than me having to decide on other options, I can actually add all of these other suggestions. So quick and easy way to create a multiple choice question, again, for some automation. It's not going to happen for every question that you have, but it does allow you some automation there, and is usually liked by most people. So you do have that answer suggestions option, and then you've got the auto-complete answers. So once I've done that, I can go ahead and decide, do I want to make this question required? Presumably in a quiz, you would. So you would turn that on, okay? If this is a question I want to duplicate, I can go ahead and do that as well. And then you've got your more options here, okay? We'll talk about that in a second. Before we do that, you've got your answer key. So right here in this question, I can decide what the answer is. I've already provided, my answer key for this question, and I can put in my point value. Okay, and I'm done. If I wanted to provide some sort of feedback, a nice option here is you can actually provide feedback in written text, or you can provide a website link or a YouTube video. So, if it's something that you think someone needs to, they get it incorrect, well, you certainly need to watch a video regarding, capitals, state capitals. You can put in a URL for a YouTube video right here. Okay, and you can do that for correct answers as well. Or a link to further information. Maybe it's a link to some sort of document that you've already provided, or a better website to check out. You can add that feedback too. So it's really nice. You don't need to just put in text feedback, but you can link them to other resources as well. Okay. So you want to go ahead and make sure you've put in your answer feedback. If that's a question, you can do that for at that time. Okay. But again, you have multiple options for question types that you can look at. Okay. If you want to import questions from a previous quiz, you can do that here. We'll walk you through that. If you want to, add a title to this question or this area, you can do that. Image, if you want to add in some images, or even a video. Okay, so maybe the question is, after watching this video, what do you think of X? Or what did you learn? Or I'm sure you can think of a multitude of questions you might want to ask after them watching a video. So you can even put that in as part of your question. Okay, I'm going to press done and go back here to my 3 dots. So I promised you I can see my description. And then what I can decide from here, and you see this a lot in forms, is when somebody answers a question, you may want them to go to a different section of your form or your quiz. So in a quiz, it may not be as common, but is in a form per se. If it's something where somebody is answering a question, I'm already a returning student. Once they answer yes to that, you may move them right down to the bottom of the form, because they don't need to answer all of the questions that you might ask a new student. So in that case, you may want to add different sections and have them move to a different section based on their answer. So you can decide that as well right here. Again, for a quiz, you don't need to make it overly complicated. I just want you to know you have those options if you chose. Okay, so that's where you would add section is right here. Okay, right. So moving forward, so you can see I created this multiple choice question here, and then I put in kind of a question that really just has an image. Sorry about that. Okay, and so you can do that. And then I've created a second section, and this was just a quick one here, and it gives you a little description of how you can add in videos, images, and additional sections to your quiz. And here's a good video to check out as well. So here's an example where you might write a question, provide it so that others can, students can provide a short answer text. So that's the type of question I set up. And in that question, I put this quick video so they can look at this first and then provide me an answer. Okay. Looking at the responses, you can see I've got one response here. Okay. So Google Forms quizzes allow you to see kind of a summary or an insight. So obviously my one response isn't going to give me too much information, but with your variety of students, you'll be able to see a summary of kind of the average points and where students are standing. You can see if there's frequently missed questions, which will help with your feedback and how you maybe change your quizzes or information going forward. You can see the quizzes scores, and you know, if you've sent out an email to someone, so in this case I sent it out to this email address, they've not yet responded. So you can send out an email reminder. And so this really gives you some nice information in a quick summary form. Okay. But I can also choose to look at each question response. Okay. And I can choose by individual. Okay, so if you wanted to ensure that you weren't having any correction bias and you just wanted to correct by question, you could do that, or you can correct by individual and how they've responded. Okay. And then when you're done correcting, you can release your score. Okay, right. So that's just one very simple example, but hopefully it gives you a good understanding of how you want to go forward. The other idea too that I like is you've got this Google Sheet. So now rather than looking here in your summary, which is easy enough to do going back into this quiz, you can also view these responses in Sheets. So a Google Sheet will be created with these responses. Okay, so you'll see the time and date, the email address of the student or the person that filled it out, what the score was, okay, and here are the questions and their responses. You could take this quiz and use this, take this Google Sheet and use this information, and then you have all of your scores right there. Maybe you import it to another spreadsheet that you might use for grading and so forth. So you do have that option as well. And then I can go back here and I can preview it and see kind of how it looks and decide, you know what, maybe something's being cut off or I don't really like this. I can easily exit out of my preview here, go back into my editing screen and change it around. Okay, you can duplicate the section if you don't want to rewrite that same information, but you want to use it later on, you can do that as well.